Welcome back, everybody, to the DanJohnUniversity.com podcast. I'm Dan John. This is podcast number 209, which really does surprise me. I'm on a remote, secret location this week, and I'll be here for a little bit. It's not really a secret, but I'm always here every week to answer your questions. Now, listen, if you have a question, send them to podcast@DanJohnUniversity.com. I'll do my best to answer each and every one. Sometimes we'll combine a few questions here and there, but overall, we do our best to answer every question you send in, and we're going to try to keep doing that for as long as we can. Let's start with this week, because we have a good question to start off this week, and I like it. It's a bit of a historical question, but there's still value, because I think there's some things about it that's still worth your time. David asked very simply this: I have been reading up on 1950s and 60s weightlifting lately and realized the split snatch and the split clean, have essentially disappeared. Do you have any experience with splitting? Are there any pros and cons with it? And why do you think it has fallen out of favor? Well, actually, the split clean and split snatch do live on in masters Olympic lifting. When you start to lose your mobility, a lot of the older lifters start moving to the split, because it's just, you either power snatch it or you, because the squat clean and squat snatch just get harder and harder as you kind of tighten up with age. Now, there's another reason it's disappeared from the platform. Olympic lifting, like every sport, follows the rules of the sport, and then the DNA becomes more and more important. I've often thought that like in basketball, if they raise the net to 15 feet, height might not be as important anymore. If they decided in track and field to change the, some of the rules, the athletes would change with it. For example, if they move the discus to, it's 2 kilos now. If they move it to the 4 kilos, the athletes would have to change. If they moved it for men to 1 kilo, the event might change also. You'll see this in American football very much, some rule changes. When I played, holding as if you took your hands off your chest. If we went like this, it was considered holding, so you had to block like this. Now, of course, you see people just grabbing on, so it's easier to throw the ball now, and it's, of course, easier to have offense now. They also made the rules for throwing the ball more open. Why do I bring up all this other nonsense? Is because when they got rid of the press in 1972, before 1972, you saw all kinds of different body types doing the Olympic lifts. Some people are born to clean and military press more naturally than, say, the snatch or the clean and jerk. Since 72, basically a particular type of body type has shown up. Let's get to your question, the pros and cons. The biggest con with the split movements is you do have to pull the bar higher, and in modern Olympic lifting, the loads are so big that it's kind of almost a explosive clean shrug, and then they leap underneath it. I'm always amazed how high they pull the bars in these big weights. But if you, especially, I really follow the Chinese methods a lot, the way they coach, the way they teach, and you'll notice today that, man, they get this certain body type, and then they train certain things, and these are weightlifting machines, like what I think Terry Todd called Kolev back in 1973 at the World Championships in Cuba. These are weightlifting machines. These guys and women, men and women, are their DNA, their training, their selection, all make a certain path on the bar, and they're very good at it. Now, I still think there's a great value for the split clean and the split snatch, and it's something I haven't done a lot, but you see a lot of Europeans do it. A lot of jumpers and throwers in Europe do split snatch and split clean, and the East Germans really emphasize the split snatch for throwers because it puts you in that throwing position. So that front leg, so I'm right-handed, so my front leg would be my left hand, my left foot. But so that's my throwing position. So if I split snatch, I pop myself into the throwing position. I have some books from Germany where people do all kinds of variations. There's one I really find fascinating. I don't know if I can recommend it, but you snatch the bar up so your left foot lands on a low box, and then you step up on it. So it's snatch, step, up, snatch, step, up. I would make sure you go really light the first few times you try this. Maybe a broomstick would be heavy enough. The advantages, I think, of the split clean, the split snatch, obviously for masters lifters because of mobility. I think for sports specificity, if you have to be strong in that position, I think it's far better to do those than lunges. Now, in total honesty, anybody who listens knows I don't like lunges. I still quote Pavel. Anybody who can do lunges doesn't need to do lunges. Anybody who can't do lunges shouldn't do lunges. I always thought that was just ideal. I don't like lunges. A lot of people from my generation don't like lunges. But I do think the split snatch and the split clean are viable options for somebody who's really trying to use specificity in the weight room. How long does it work? I would say you probably have a narrow band as an athlete. It'd be weeks, not months, how it'll help you with your performance. But David, it's a good question. You don't hear it very often, and I'm glad to hear it. Here in the United States, we had a guy named Jim Napier, I think his name was, who split snatched well into my era as a lifter. And of course, I think the last world and Olympic champions would have been in the 60s, 64 for sure. And I don't know how much after that. And of course, it's basically disappeared. It's interesting to say this, but even the split jerk is kind of slowly disappearing. I doubt it'll ever disappear because I still think it's a superior way to put the weight overhead. But with these modern lifters, when they do that push jerk or that deep squat jerk, I mean, that is something to behold. I find it amazing. I don't know if I could have ever done the squat jerk that I see being done now. I don't think I was ever that flexible. So, David, thank you. I know it's an unusual question for many of our listeners, but I think there's value to it. So thank you. We'll move on to Julian's question. Julian says this, and it's a little bit, it's a longer question, but I think the answer is something people want to know about. Julian says, I have a question about progressive overload. What parameters do you use to know when to increase resistance intensity? Well, this is the first question of many, but so I always worry about this particular question. In other words, you're asking me when to add load, I think. But remember, adding load is just one part of the formula. There's also sets. I think you get stronger by additional sets. I know you get stronger by adding additional reps to the load you're using, and that's a major thing I really emphasize in my training and my coaching. But besides increasing the load, increasing the number of sets, increasing the number of reps, there's also increasing density. With those first three examples, we're playing around with both load and volume. Volume is basically reps times sets. So 3 sets of 8 is 24. And if you do it with 100, doesn't matter if it's kilos, pounds, stone, or whatever, ball bearings. If you do 3 by 8, you do 24 reps with 100, and then a few months later, you do 24 reps with 200. I know that you're stronger, even if you went from 3 sets of 8 to 24 singles. I know you're stronger, okay? Because that's the rule of volume and load. Density is something I don't think enough people really play with anymore, and I think it's to their detriment. So density is, there's two ways to look at it. Same amount of work, less time, or more work, same time, more work, less time. But the idea is we're taking our work and we're squeezing in the time. You can also chase more reps in a set amount of time. This is actually a great way for, it's a great hypertrophy workout and general, I don't even know what the word would be, general density. If you want to get more attributes from your training program, you give yourself 10 minutes and you're going to do, by the way, I think single arm presses is a great way to start in this, but so is pull-ups and obviously every exercise can work, but I like single arm presses to teach this first because people understand it intuitively. So what I would do is I set a 10-minute timer. I take a kettlebell, a dumbbell, whatever, a barbell. Let's just say it's a 24 kilo, and I do it a set of 7. I write down 7 left, set of 7, 7 right. And then the next set, I do 6, I do 6, I do 8, I do 8. And I just keep jotting down. And when the timer goes off at 10 minutes, I add up the number of left presses and right presses. Next time I do this workout, I am chasing that total number. Let's say in a 10-minute period, I'm just making up, we did 50. In the next workout, my goal is to get 51. Now, what happens usually is you get 60. But then what happens in that 10-minute period is you begin to, I was about to say you press the time limit, which is play on words, but as you mess with that time, you'll notice that you suddenly get to a point where you can't increase reps anymore. It's just, there's just not enough time in the 10 minutes. And then you go up and load, and that instantly brings those numbers back down, which are easier to chase. If you can max that time out, you might be able to, so if you're doing the standard kettlebells, let's say you get up to, that would be a lot, 24 kilos, and you get up to 100 reps in 10 minutes, left and right, left 100, right 100. I do think that's doable. Well, next bell would be the 28, at least in my gym, would be the 28. If you chase up to that 100 rep there and then jump to the 32, now we're looking at a fairly good load for single arm presses. To get yourself up to that 100 left, 100 right in the time allotted is going to be harder and harder. You might want to chase that for a week, 3 workouts, 6 workouts, 4 weeks of it, and then back off and move to something else. So I think it's an overview of how you do it. As an Olympic lifter, we would add weight when you made the lift. Now that is a really different way of training, and most of our listeners probably wouldn't get a lot of value out of that. If I'm snatching, I'm going to use pounds this time because I can remember my first workout with the Olympic snatch, I snatched 165. The following time I came in, when I got to 165 and made it, my coach asked me to go to 170. I made it, we went to 175, and that's how the first few months were. You make a lift, you go up. So a lot of it depends on what you're trying to do. Personally, I like it when people ask this question to play around with this concept called density, where you're chasing more reps in the same amount of time, because I think it's a very natural teaching device for even if you're alone in your own home gym. You've got your timer. It can be your 101 Dalmatians wall clock. It can be your iPhone. It can be your magic device, whatever you have as your timer, and then you have a piece of paper, you just scribble down reps after every set. I think that's by far the simplest way for me to determine when to add resistance. The next part. As a general rule of thumb, I usually wait until I can do 10 reps of a given weight before increasing resistance. That's pretty good. Brian Mann, a couple of years, M-A-N-N, he just moved. He was at Miami. I think he's at Texas A&M now. He did a nice study years ago. He took the DeLorme protocol. That's the 3 sets of 8. And then he did a test set on the last set where so I do my 3 sets of 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3 times. and then a fourth set where we went for it. He also used the traditional DeLorme. I'm not going to go into all the details right now, but it's pretty obvious. If you got 7, 8, or 9 reps, you stay with that weight the next workout. If you got 4, 5, 6, and now it gets kind of hedgy about 7, which way to go, you would go up. You would go down in weight the next time. So if you get 5, 6, 7, you're probably going too hard. Now, if you get 15 reps, the weight's too light. 15, 14, those are obvious. 13's obvious. 12, 11, and 10, and even 9, 9 and 7 are just, that would be a real decision to be made. If it's a beautiful, perfect lift at 9 and then you fail on 10, that's radically different than if your head's moving all over the place and the bar is twisting around or whatever. If you get, say, 12 reps, then you go up. I like the fact, Julian, that you have a formula, and I think that's pretty good. The downside of using 10, it's a fair number of reps, but I think it's, as I always say, repeatable, doable, and reasonable. An example would be double kettlebell clean and press with 24 kilos as my working set weight until I achieve 10 reps. Then I'd go to 28 and work my way up to 10 over time, then 32. I train for challenge, functionality, longevity, and enjoyment. Is this an optimal approach to overload, or do you have a different approach for steady gains over time? First off, I'm not sure in strength and conditioning, like I always say, pretty good is pretty good. You're looking for optimal, and that's going to be tough. You're kind of looking for perfect, and that's going to be tough. One thing I would say, and I think if you heard my overview here, you would hear that I put a few more parameters than you do. So you say 10 reps. I say 10 reps with good technique. I say, 10 reps. It's got to be done. Well, it has to be done beautifully. It's got to be perfect technique. If you rest 5 minutes before that set and you get the 10 in, that's gonna be a lot different than if you rest 30 seconds before you get the 10 in. So make sure you have some of those other parameters locked and loaded. Yeah, that's a very good way to do things, Julian, but I would like you to think about some of the other things I said too. That's a fine question. When you get to something as simple as steady gains, which is a phrase I haven't heard. I remember back in the 70s, we always said I was making gains. So that was the answer. When you were on a program, I remember being with Mike Cohen one time and talking about a program that Mike Cohen had shared with Eric Subert. And Mike went, yeah, I made good gains in that program. Gains. Progressive resistance exercise is what we're chasing here. And of course, progressive resistance exercise is what leads to gains in hypertrophy and strength and all those other wonderful qualities we lift weights for. The best way to do it is to progress, and that is with load, sets, reps, appropriate variations in exercise selection, and some monitoring of rest periods. And how you get there is, even though I only gave you 5 options there, in my mind, there's literally thousands of combinations you can get there. It's a good question. The most important thing to come away with this, Julian, is if it's working, stay with it. Okay? Thank you. Timu asked a question. I'm a 43-year-old male trying to get strength training a habit. I've been very satisfied with the push, pull, squat, hinge, carry, and other thing format. It has clarified things for him very well. I own several kettlebells of many sizes. I usually train inside at my home or in my garden. If I remember correctly, you have said that the carry move or for weight or distance should be changed often. I have experimented with uneven farmer walks that would be when one bell is heavier than the other bell. And by the way, it's exactly what I did yesterday. I went to I did a workout at the park over here, and then I snorkeled after that, with a group, and I had uneven bells and I had a long walk, and on the way back I had to remind myself to switch hands. Uneven carries can be very good. Uneven presses can be good. Uneven double kettlebell front squats and cleans can be outstanding. And I also like uneven dumbbell and uneven kettlebell presses, bench press in the vertical family. He asks about the suitcase carry on the next question, and I don't even know how to say this nicely, but I invented the suitcase carry, so I am a fan of it. But it comes down to this. I remember you naming some asymmetrical walks, like one-hand suitcase carrying and one-hand waiter walking. Is there a reason you have not spoken about asymmetrical farmer walks? Yeah, but the farmer walks I use are asymmetrical. When I teach what we call the crosswalk, that's the waiter with this hand and the suitcase with this hand, I always recommend a lighter bell up top and a heavier bell at the bottom. Asymmetricals have their value, especially with most trainers I know who don't have a ton of equipment. Most of the people I interact with, when I talk to general population people, most of the people I talk with are home gym, garage gym trainers. When I work with, more professional teams and stuff like that, they've got enough equipment. They don't even have to consider some of the stuff we're talking about right here. So if you have a home gym with odd-sized bells, you can get a lot of benefit out of it. The most obvious would be the crosswalk, but the suitcase carry is by itself an asymmetrical carry. Okay, let's review. You have nothing in this hand and you have something in this hand. The waiter walk, you have nothing in this hand and you have something in this hand. Asymmetrical farmer walk can be done as if you've ever done an accidentally loaded hex bar or trap bar farmer walk where you got more weight on one side and more on the left, you will notice the next day the torquing that you get, through the spine on the load. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you'll notice it. It's not that I ignore it or anything. It's just, for most people, just get into loaded carries is all I want them to do. For those of you listening, you want to play around with asymmetrical farmer walks, try my usual rule, if you don't mind. I always try to go a 2-to-1 ratio. So if I'm using a 32 in one hand, use a 16 in the other. So make the differences massive. So if I have a 50-pound dumbbell in this hand and 100 in this hand, I have to make adaptations as I walk, maybe even more so with a traditional even-sided farmer walk. Long-term value, I'm not sure there's anything magical about it, whether it's good or bad, but I do know it certainly lights up the nervous system, and you'll notice it the next day. A good question. Got a question from Michael. Who are kettlebell certifications for? They're for everybody. I understand it is an instructor class, but do people who don't teach often show up? Yeah. In fact, in my case, Michael, and I want to pat myself on the back too hard, but a lot of people come to my RKCs because they want to be trained by me for 2 days. And they also want the challenge of that 2-day RKC. There are some things about going through the course, even if you're just a garage gym trainer and you're all by yourself, having all those different sets of eyes on you is going to make a huge difference in the way you train on a normal day. But if you really want to get better, like one of the things that really helped me as a discus thrower was to start coaching the discus. I can't tell you how many times, it's kind of an arm process. You watch someone doing something in the throw and you kind of cross your arms like this, and then you squeeze and you kind of rub your eyes and go, why don't I do, I'm giving this person this brilliant advice. Why am I not doing that? So when you, at an instructor course, look at other people and you see what they're doing wrong or doing right, very often you go the whole, why did I not do that? So I think that's the best advantage. I've been training with kettlebells for a few years now and greatly enjoy it, but I'm not planning on teaching others, at least professionally. Can I still take the class? Absolutely. Michael, I have a couple of them coming up. Just go to dragondoor.com, sign up, and I'll see you there. And if not, do you do workshops for us regular people? Yeah, I do them all the time. They're just not very well attended. I think ever since COVID, people just don't go anymore. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an email both before and after workshops. I did a workshop up at Michael Krifka up in the DC area. And this person said, yeah, I wanted to go to the workshop, but it was an hour drive away from me. Well, for God's sakes, I fly across the country, or I fly, when I do workshops in like Poland or Germany, I'm flying multiple time zones, multiple plane flights. I'm jet lagged to death, but the person who will go, who has all this, won't go 1 hour. But it's a life truth. And that's why most people aren't very successful. As I tell my inner circle all the time, 1 out of 20 people exercise, 1 out of 20 people floss their teeth, 1 out of 20 people retire with enough money to be safe and not need any help, even like Social Security or social net stuff. I mean, I think 1 in 20 people probably read books. I think of the 20 people who would like to hear me in workshops, only 1 in 20 goes. So I didn't mean that to be mean or jerky or anything, but it's just a kind of a life truth I keep bumping into. I think it's very easy to be successful. I really do. Show up. Don't quit. Ask questions. I wrote that in a 1996 newsletter when I first became an administrator. There's nothing new. By the way, someone did claim that I stole that from them, but in 1996, there wasn't really an internet, so how I could have possibly stole that from them is interesting to me. And actually, I stole it from somebody else. So, you just stole from a master thief. But honestly, Michael, comes down to this: show up, don't quit, ask questions. So if you see a kettlebell cert, show up. Thank you. Nick asks this: I am planning on doing a bulk up during the fall semester and hopefully end up bigger and stronger than I am now. But after the semester ends, I won't have access to my university's gym and will just have the barbell rack and 24 kilo bell I have at home, which is a lot of equipment for a home gym. That's not bad at all. I know a lot of people might be listening going, well, that's not very much. If you got a barbell, a rack, and a kettlebell, you have a good gym. Honestly, if you have one dumbbell and you use it and a broomstick, you have a good gym if you decide to train hard enough. I see this as a good time to shed some of the weight I would have gained in the fall. Yeah, okay, so I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but when we do a bulk up program, you do put on some body fat, but the new lean body mass on paper, once you stop force feeding yourself, you will naturally lean back out. But let me read on and see if we get there. That leads me to my question. I'm wondering what you think about doing the 10,000 swing challenge and easy strength at the same time for 4 weeks. It sounds like a hard challenge, but I imagine the swings would make it so that even while in a deficit, I'd still eat substantial amounts of food, and the easy strength would help me peak from the strength built through the volume work during my bulk. Well, so I could only recommend, Nick, my program called Mass Made Simple. It's available online. It's available at ontargetpublishing.com, and is very inexpensive. I would buy the book, the spiral bound book, because then you can put all your notes in there, which I think is like, people tell me they buy the book on Kindle. I'm like, how do you possibly see the workouts on your phone? I don't know how you do it. And it's also available at danjohnuniversity.com. At DJU, you can make the workout generator ping you Mass Made Simple, and it's all built in. It's real easy to do. So, that's a 6 or 7 week course. After it, I generally tell people to take a week or two off. And when I mean off, it'd be like 3 whole body workouts a week. Now, your question here about doing easy strength with the 10,000 swing challenge. I would only recommend, if you're going to do that, first off, we have to dump the hinge. So here's the template you're going to have to probably use. You're going to have to do, I would suggest, well, generally I do half kneeling presses on this program. In the warm-up, I'd say do goblet squats. Goblet squat and hang in your warm-up. Do presses in easy strength. Do pull-ups. And I would say, honestly, this is one of those pull-ups, chin-ups, or parallel pull-ups. That's what I would do. And the only exercise you would do that for easy strength. Well, I mean, I like the idea of you still doing the ab wheel, the ab roller, because of how it counters everything else. But your lower body's going to get taken care of by the 10,000 swings. So 5 days a week, if you did 2 sets of 5 in a press variation, 2 sets of 5 or 1 set of 10 in a pull-up, chin-up, parallel, or lat pull-down machine, if that's what you have to do, an ab wheel for 10, and then the sets of the swings. 5 days a week, you would make good progress. The original way we used to teach the 10,000 swing challenge was I asked you to do sets of presses or push-ups or squats between each round. And I still think that's the best way to go for most people most of the time. Mondays we did, Mondays we did vertical presses, kettlebells. Say day 2, Tuesday, was goblet squats. Day 3 ended up being hangs. Day 4, nothing. And day 5 would be something like push-ups or any other variation of something you'd want to do. By the way, that's not bad what I just said. But yeah, you certainly could do the combination. You just got to remember, don't do any hinge. You get enough hinging in. Now, there are going to be people who can deadlift and do the 10,000 swing challenge at the same time. But in my experience, that's becoming rarer and rarer. As I'm sitting here in a chair, I think I know the problem. Nick, I'd like you to do it. I would like you to do Mass Made Simple. And then I'd like you to do this, and I really want to hear your results. This fascinates me. Oddly, this week, folks, that's all the questions we have. Usually there's a lot more, but while I'm reading, this is a busy time of year for a lot of people, so we're not getting the volume of questions we usually get. It is true in the last few months we've really picked up, but this particular week was a little bit lighter. So it's a little bit shorter episode than normal. Remember, if you have questions, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. I'll do my best to answer them. Sometimes I get long-winded and I might seem to get off task, but one of the things I want you to understand, in the closing, I might have to do this in the opening, because not a lot of people listen all the way through, but my mind is very systematic. My mind is a geometry mind. But when I answer questions, I tend to Venn diagram questions in my mind. And that means I'm always looking to make sure I give you a complete and full answer. And then in the end, I try to summarize the key points, the points that are universally true. I might do a little extra lecture on what Venn diagrams are. In my book, Can You Go? You can see how I use the Venn diagram to work with clients that we call everybody else, general population. So sometimes if I seem like if I keep going round and round and round, I want to make sure I highlight all the big key points before I narrow in on the answer. I could just narrow in on the answer, but it wouldn't be a podcast. It would be a series of short, yes, no answers. Well, remember, podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. And until next time, let's all keep on lifting and learning. Thank you.